In this video, I'm going through 10 tips on how to get better footage with your smartphone gimbal. Now this video is sponsored by Zhiyun, and this is their new Smooth Q2 gimbal. It's like a tiny little gimbal. And I'm gonna go through a little bit about this gimbal at the end of the video, give you my review, but I wanted to do 10 tips on how to get better footage. And if you stick around till the end, I'm gonna be giving one of you this gimbal. So let's get into it. So the biggest problem when it comes to these small gimbals is how light the gimbal is. It's so easy to move this around. When you have a bigger gimbal with a bigger camera on it, it's much easier to keep it steady. So when it comes to working with this gimbal, you really have to focus in on a few things to keep the shot steady, because if you're walking around and just having it go like this, your footage is not gonna be very good. Guys, if you're new here to this channel, my name is Jeven Dovey. I do filmmaking tutorials, I do product reviews, and also I do a lot of YouTube training style videos. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on those bell notifications so you don't miss one of these videos. And Rachel's arms are about to fall off, so she's gotta put this down.
This is ridiculous. It's shoulders today.
Okay, so the first tip is make sure that you're planning out your shots. One of the worst things you can do is just turn the gimbal on and kind of just spray everywhere and shoot everything. If you want to have good looking footage, then the key is actually planning and putting some thought behind each shot. So before you hit record, think through where you're starting, where you're going, and where you're ending. So if you're doing a moving shot, how big is the movement? How small is the movement? If you are filming a subject, what is specifically that you're looking for when you're filming that subject? Those kind of things are gonna help you create better looking footage. So plan out each shot. Tip number 2 is make sure you try to keep your gimbal on a level plane. So this is what I was talking about earlier. When your gimbal is light, it's easy to move up and down all over the place. So the key with getting good footage is keeping it on a level plane. So really focus in on where your hand placement is and make sure it's in a good position that you can hold over a period of time. Because if you have that up and down motion, what happens is it creates a bobble effect. And this is really noticeable in the footage. Even with the stabilizers and everything in smartphones, you'll see this up and down bobble. So the key is try to keep your hand on a single plane so that you have smooth, steady footage with everything that you're doing. All right, so tip number 3 is body placement without moving your feet. And so what do I mean by this? This is something that I use all the time when I'm creating videos with gimbals. When you're moving, when you step, there's more chances of the bobble happening, what I was talking about in the last tip. So if you plant your feet and you're focused on just moving your body from one side to the other, then you can create a more steady shot than if you were to be walking. Because when you walk, there's more opportunity for the footage to kind of bobble because there's more things happening in your body. So if you shift from, say, left to right and just shimmy your legs, you can get a pretty decent sized movement and you can get a really nice steady shot because you're just shimmying your weight. And if you keep your gimbal on a level plane, then that's when you get those really smooth shots. Now, when it comes to this, when you get to that end point, just push yourself as far as you can go before you tip. And a lot of times I'll trip over myself because what happens is I move from one direction to another and I start at the farthest I can on one side and then shift my weight as far as I can the other way, and then eventually you fall. So you kind of go the furthest distance that you can without actually moving. Now tip number 4 comes when you actually need to start moving. So last tip I talked about, body movement. Now introduce some steps. There's a specific walk when it comes to creating better looking gimbal footage. And the key is sit low and kind of walk like a duck. So the idea is that you want your body, the mass of your body, to be moving on a single plane, just like your hand is moving on a single plane. So you're gonna have to find how low you have to go to kind of squat and move so that your body isn't moving up and down, your arm's not moving up and down. The less movement up and down that you can make your body, your arm, all of that, the less bobble that you're going to get. So it kind of looks funny and you have to practice this step, but if you just walk, you're not gonna get good footage, you're gonna get bobbling footage. So you really need to sit a little bit lower and really put some emphasis in the way you walk. Now your body movements are super important and all of it plays together. The next tip comes down to how you're actually shooting. So think in terms of a bigger camera. So imagine that this tiny gimbal was a giant Red or something else, like an Ari Alexa or something. How would you move that camera to get camera movement? You wouldn't swing it all over the place because it's so heavy. It's got big lenses, you've got lots of gear wrapped on it, so you would move it slowly with something like a dolly, or you'd move like a jib or something like that. So the key is, think of your camera as a bigger camera. What are the style of movements that you would make? So one of them might be just a dolly from left to right. Also, if you have like a selfie stick, then you can mount this on the bottom and be able to do jib-like shots. That's the really cool thing about small gimbals, is when you attach a stick to the bottom of the gimbal, you can create these cool like arcing motions up and down and all over, and you can really create some interesting looking visuals. It works because you don't have to have some crazy huge jib, you don't have to have like a really heavy monopod. You can really use lightweight gear and be able to get some awesome footage. And that wraps right into my 6th tip, which is use extra gear around the gimbal. Gimbal is great, but finding those extra pieces of gear that will enhance your shooting is key to getting some really dynamic looking footage. So an extension pole, that is the way to go to get some good sweeping shots. If you're also shooting yourself, you can get the gimbal further away, get a wider shot if you have like a selfie stick of some sort. So having that extra gear is really gonna help you create some really dynamic looking footage. And that wraps right into my next tip, which is create dynamic shots. Now, what do I mean by this? Put a couple of the movements together. So say you're walking forward, we'll also put a pan down. So try to put 2 movements together to create more dynamic looking footage. So a pan down and a move forward looks better than just panning down or just moving forward. So find ways where you can combine 2 different movements or 2 different things to create more dynamic looking shots. So it might be coming out from behind a tree and then going over another tree or something like that. All right, I was just finishing up this video, and there's one more thing I want to talk about when it comes to dynamic shots, and that is with the Smooth Q, you can actually do VORTEX, which is something that I haven't seen in a lot of these smaller gimbals. And so with the VORTEX mode, you can create some interesting dynamic shots, find some ways to fit it into your projects to do something a little bit different. Now with the last tip, what I was saying is coming out from behind an object, this works great, but you have to be using your manual settings. Otherwise, the auto exposure is gonna kick in and the auto focus. And so it's not gonna look as good as if you use everything manuals. So there's different apps that you can get for your smartphone, and you wanna set everything to manual. And the reason for this is you don't want the exposure to auto fluctuate. And the same thing with focus. You don't wanna focus on the object like right here in front of you and then it focuses away from you, because that's not a very cinematic looking shot. Rather, it would be great if something was out of focus in front, pops out, all of a sudden the subject way in the distance is in focus. Now obviously with smartphones, you don't have this super shallow depth of field, but there is still focusing and exposure breathing when you're doing auto exposure and auto focus. So use manual modes. Okay, number 9 is create transitions using your gimbal. Your gimbal is a great tool to be able to create some unique, seamless transitions. Now, one in particular that I like is going from behind an object and then popping out with a different shot when you come out on the other side. So for example, I have a tree here, Rachel's walking, I have a wide shot, I'm gonna pan across, all of a sudden I'm now down at her feet. And this is just a simple transition that you can do in your editing software. Just keyframing a matte across your footage, cutting out one footage, and then keyframe it across as the wipe happens. Now, if you want to know more about some seamless transitions, I'll put links in the description to some other videos that I've done that are all about seamless transitions, but gimbals are a great way to create these seamless transitions, because when you're moving and it's super smooth, you can create some cool effects going from one shot to another. Another easy one is put the gimbal in POV mode and just wipe it. So you're moving smooth in one direction and then you wipe to the left or to the right, do the same motion into the next shot, got an awesome transition. Super easy to use. And my final tip, and this goes without saying, but practice makes perfect. So the only way to get good at getting better gimbal footage is to shoot gimbal footage. So get out there, practice a ton, and you'll be able to get some awesome looking footage. Okay, so let's talk about the Zhiyun Smooth Q2. So I've been playing around with this gimbal for a little while. I've had it for about a week now. It's a interesting little gimbal for sure. I like it. Now at first I thought it was gonna be a little too simple, but sometimes the simplest things are the best, because when you're working with a gimbal, you don't always need like all these crazy bells and whistles, especially when it comes to a smartphone gimbal. In reality, when I use a gimbal, I pull it out and I either use it in tilt lock mode, follow mode, lock mode, or POV mode, depending on if I'm doing transitions or not. And what's really cool about the Zhiyun Smooth Q2 is that it's very simple. So on the back here, you only have 3 buttons. You have your power button, you have your joystick, And you also have your record button. Now what's really cool with the record button is you don't have to link your phone to get the record to work. So right now I'm just in the Moment app. I click the record button and it starts recording using that app. So like I said, super simple, easy to use. You can use the record with any app that you're in and it just seems to signal to your phone, which is a great feature for sure. Now also, it's super small, so you just have to really focus on your shots like I've been talking about in this video. However, this thing can fit in your pocket, fit in your bag, it's great. Now, the last thing that's kind of interesting about this gimbal is that it does have its own plate. So if you wanted to leave this on your phone and then take this off, you can, and pop it back on. Interesting feature, I haven't really seen a smartphone gimbal with a plate system like this, so something unique about the Zhiyun Smooth Q2. So guys, if you want to win this gimbal, I'll put a link down below in the description to the entry page to where you can win this. Also, I'd love it if you guys could just comment and let me know why you want to win this gimbal, and I'd appreciate it if you were subscribed to this channel as well. But guys, that is it. I'll see you on the next one.